Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be talking about Iron Man issue 2, written by Joshua Williamson with art by Carmen Carnero, colors by Nolan Woodward, and letters by Joe Caramagna. Tony's past comes back to haunt him yet again as he remembers one of the many times he fought Madame Mask after she stole one of his armor briefcases, chasing her to Seattle. Their battle eventually reaches a stalemate and Mask proclaims her hatred for Stark, which of course is immediately followed up by both hero and villain post-coitus. This is some classic old school Tony Stark sleeping with the enemy, and he's had a few former flames who turned out to be villains over the years, so him betting Mask is to be expected. I really like how the entire sequence as well from here on out, especially this sequence where they're in the bed and everything, is actually bathed in the blue light of Tony's armor chest piece. Carmen and Nolan really outdid themselves visually with that because it casts all these great shadows over everything, which is really handy because we never actually get to see Madame Mask's face. It's kind of like a running thing with her. We never really see her face unless she's got the gold mask on. So casting all these long shadows thanks to the armor chest piece allows her to stay in those shadows, and they kind of are able to work that into the character, which I thought was quite neat. As they lay in the bed, Tony admits that he worries about people stealing his armor, but his one true fear is that there is another Tony Stark out there, one who might become a villain. Back in the present day, Iron Man has a classic team up with Captain America, who chastises Tony for tangling with Mask as the duo fight off Dread Knight and his Dread Squires outside the Latvian embassy in New York. Williamson has a knack for writing heroes doing big heroic things, big saves, fighting villains, but he does it in such a casual way. Like here, Tony and Steve are just having a good old chat while dodging lasers and saving little girls from falling buildings. It's one of the things I like about Williamson's writing. He does it all the time over in his Superman book, where he makes it feel just so informal and casual, which to these heroes it would be. This is just something they do every day, so it would kind of just become like, it's just what I do. It's just, like breathing. Dread Knight is offended that the heroes are paying very little attention to his demands for wanting to take over Latveria in the wake of Doctor Doom supposedly dying. Tony and Steve really don't care, instead talking about their current whereabouts of AIM, which Steve knows they are pretty scattered and, pardon the pun, aimless. But he has a list of current AIM bases for Tony. In the middle of the fight, Tony also receives a call from Luna Lucia, the caterer from Tony's award show from the previous issue, who got his number from his personal chef, who's an old friend of hers. Luna actually being a reoccurring character is kind of a surprise, since I figured it would be kind of like a one and done, background character he kind of flirts with, just to kind of build up that, classic Tony stuff. He's flirting with everything that has legs and just, kind of being the playboy philanthropist guy. But I kind of like that she's coming back, and she seems to be sort of someone who's, kind of got Tony around her finger. Tony is very intrigued by this woman and wants to know more about her. Of course, I am immediately suspicious since, a new character being introduced. We've gotten villains like AIM, stealing people who are like Tony Stark. I immediately am very suspicious that, maybe she's like an AIM plant to try and get close to Tony or something. I'm intrigued to see what they're going to do with her, because obviously we have Pepper Potts back on the scene now, so I imagine that Tony is going to want to try and get back with her, or maybe there'll be some sort of romantic triangle going on, which would be really interesting because, we haven't seen that with Tony Stark in a while. I mean, we have, but, the one thing I do like about Luna so far is that she appears to be a kind of quote-unquote normie. She just seems like a normal person, which again makes me kind of more suspicious of her. Like, there's definitely something gonna happen with her, but from what we see from over these last two issues, I just like she's just like a normal person, and that seems to intrigue Tony, so much so that Luna arranges a dinner date for them, planning on choosing the restaurant herself since she doesn't trust Tony's taste in food. After Tony hangs up the call and helps deliver the final blow to Dread Knight, Steve makes it known that Tony seems lost in his own head, at least more than usual. Tony, of course, in classic Tony fashion, brushes off these concerns and takes off, leaving Steve to make contact with someone else, telling them they need to keep an eye on Tony Stark. So yeah, this is kind of building off the final pages of issue 1, where the new Illuminati, new Avengers, or some type of team that Cap was a part of, with people like Norman Osborn, Sue Storm, Reed Richards, all these characters who are big heavy hitters. And I'm intrigued to see what exactly that team is and why they're keeping an eye on it. The little bits we get here from Steve makes it seem like they don't want Tony to go off half-cocked on one of his missions and kind of screw things up for the rest of them, which is intriguing, which is something I've never really considered, because he's done all this sort of stuff before, but why are they honing in on this particular one at this point in time? Surely they'd want to rein him in earlier and all these other antics he's done, but I'm intrigued to see what Williamson has in store for that plot, because it just kind of came out of nowhere, there's a team who's now against Tony, and that it's made up of all of people Tony would consider friends. Elsewhere, Adam Ware is taken into a prison cell containing various other genius-level people, all whom think that AIM has kidnapped them to build some sort of weapon together. Their theorizing is put on hold as Fixer arrives, telling the gathered people they will be made to see how creative they can really become. So I quite like Fixer is getting used here. He's one of the very few Iron Man villains who doesn't technically wear a big hulking metal suit of armor as just a recolor of an Iron Man suit. He does wear sort of some sort of armor, but it's not the general thing that he usually wears. And I've always liked the design of him and his gadgets as well. He's had various different designs over the last couple of years, but I like this new one a bit more with the headband and the goatee and everything. It looks pretty cool. Fixer has his men cart the people off to their own rooms, taking them into a giant facility created by Arcade, Mojo, and Mysterio. Despite working for AIM, it's also clear Fixer is mighty jealous, since they are trying to make a new Tony Stark, yet he believes he is their Tony Stark, and he is right there, and he's just as smart as Tony. Madame Mask tells him to calm down, as their experiments are yielding results, even if it fails to produce a Tony Stark of their own to control. Pepper and Melinda May, meanwhile, continue to investigate missing people from Tony's lab in the desert, hating that they have to withhold information from the victims' families. Pepper knows that Tony is definitely hiding something from them, since he went off half-cocked and without telling them anything. And Melinda couldn't really care less, seeing Pepper is just trying to use her as some sort of couples counseling or therapy. I quite like this. I quite like that we saw Melinda in the first issue. She was just so done with looking after Tony. This is sort of fallout from the Doctor Doom event, One World Under Doom, where the government are now sort of looking after Tony a little bit, and Melinda May is kind of the liaison. So I like that she's just so done with Tony's antics, and I like here she's even done with Pepper and just I'm not your therapist. Go talk to someone else. I'm trying to do my job here. I quite like that. Melinda tries to find where Tony is, finding that he's traveling the world dealing with AIM, trying to find the facility Adam and the others are being held at, but he's not turned up anything just yet. Tony eventually lands in MADRIPOOR, where he's not really welcome at all at the local bars, told by the criminal patrons and the villain Grizzly that he is not welcome in their establishment. I love Tony's look here, since this is the first time we kind of get a full look at Joshua Williamson's Tony Stark, and I like that they've completely done with the MCU Tony. That's, a thing of the past. He doesn't have the goatee beard thing anymore. He's just rocking a giant mustache and a little soul patch, and he's dressing like he's from the 1970s. Tony finally has some style back to him, and it's awesome. I love this Tony Stark. Grizzly warns Stark about asking for trouble, but Tony insists that he is only looking for someone. Trouble is exactly what Tony is after though, as he fights Grizzly and the bouncers, dealing with them without even using his suit, proving that he is more than just the Iron Man armor. Throwing Grizzly through a doorway, Tony goes to meet who he is there to see, who is revealed to be Modok, who is chilling out in a Roman bathhouse. Modok berates Tony for interrupting his vacation, citing how he never interrupts Iron Man's, as Tony demands to know where AIM and Madame Mask are hiding. Modok reveals that he and Mask are not really on good terms right now, especially after what happened with all of the symbiotes. Something that happened in that all-new Venom book that I'm not reading, so I don't really care about that sort of stuff. Modok decides to throw a few verbal jabs at Tony, gloating about how Mask left him yet again. And of course, this gets under Tony's skin, so he ties tires of doing things the hard way and opts to do things the easy way, summoning his suit of armor to him and attacking Modok, demanding he tell him what he wants to know. Tony being on a short fuse is interesting, but it's the ticking clock element of the story. You know, he's got to find these people before AIM get what they need and then eventually dispose of these people. So he's against the clock, and I can understand he not wanting to give the time of day to someone like Modok, who is literally wearing no clothes at all and is just like lounging around a bathhouse making jokes. Like, he's got no time for that. So I can understand why Tony is a bit short of a fuse here. As Tony threatens Modok, AIM storm the club and head for the bathhouse, getting ready to shoot to kill Iron Man. Tony thinks that Modok called in the AIM soldiers, thinking that he clearly knows where Mask is hiding out, but Modok didn't call them, thinking that Tony could not be so stupid. Since AIM isn't there to save him, they are there to kill him and Iron Man, and Tony has to help him survive. So it looks like next issue we're going to be getting a Iron Man Modok team up, and I'm looking forward to that. That's kind of a cool looking team up. I like that they've set up here that Tony has that short fuse, so he's kind of playing for once the straight guy in the situation, where Modok is playing the sort of jokey side character and Tony doesn't have any time for that. So it's kind of like a nice role reversal in a way, because usually Tony fulfills that role and is kind of jokey and a little bit more lighthearted and blasé. So I'm intrigued to see how that's going to play out, as well as like AIM is obviously consolidating a bit of power here. Mask is looking to take over what little stuff that Modok had, so I'm intrigued to see how his technology and stuff will work into the whole creating a new Tony Stark subplot. Iron Man issue 2 was a great extension to that first issue, really fleshing out the plots a little bit more and putting Tony on his journey to locate AIM as the clock ticks down. I love that Williamson got to flesh out his Tony Stark in this issue, making him more of the 1970s disco man, at least in design wise, which I really like. And I like also that he has a very short fuse. He doesn't have time to mess around while the clock is ticking down while AIM are trying to find their own Tony Stark. I can't wait to see what Williamson has in store for us in that third issue, being that it's being teased that we're getting a Modok Iron Man team up, which is quite interesting. And the plot is moving at a really nice pace. Every issue feels so far that we're getting a nice chunk of the plot revealed to us. So I'm looking forward to that third issue in a couple of weeks. I'm going to give this issue an 8 out of 10.